Welcome to the Finding Joy in Your Home podcast. I am your host, Jamie Balmet, and this is the podcast where we blend deeply theological topics with thoroughly practical application, all for God's glory. Hey ladies, welcome to the Finding Joy in Your Home podcast. I am your host, Jamie Balmet. Once again, I think this is the second week in a row. We sadly do not have the video going for those of you watching on YouTube. So sorry about that. If you missed last week, my grandmother passed away. And with about 2 days notice, we had to pack up for a 2-week road trip across country, which means we just didn't have time to get these episodes done beforehand. So we are now at my brother and sister-in-law's house, and I'm recording in the basement. So I'm here with you guys, but I don't have video. We'll be back to our normal stuff next week, thankfully. We're really feeling ready to head back. You know, when you're just really like, I need my own bed, that is what we're feeling like. So this is actually really perfect right now for the topic we're talking about tonight, because just now getting set up to record, this is my third place that I have tried recording. And my next step was to get the lapel mic, you know, like a little mic you just clip on your shirt, and to go record in the van, because I've had a time tonight getting this recording done. And it's due. We got to actually get it in tonight. It's due. And so anyway, it's one of those nights that I was already thinking this topic is really what I need to talk about. It's what I'm feeling. And after tonight, I majorly need to talk about it. And God is also just good and gracious to teach us these lessons and then teach again and again. So what we're going to be chatting about, I'm going to be just really speaking from my own heart tonight, which is always my favorite to do. All right, so we will hear from our two sponsors for today's episode. We have One-Skin and Happy Mammoth, so I'm excited to share those with you. I did want to give you guys one really quick announcement. We have our Joyful Home app, which is launching. We haven't given you really any details here on the podcast. If you're a podcast listener and you don't kind of follow along in other places, we've been teasing this new secret project. Well, it is finally coming this week, but the big announcement is it is not coming now until March 15th. So we've had some just kind of a weird scramble with Apple getting the app published. They have to do like their final review check and publish. And we were told it would take, a certain amount of time. And now we found out it's going to be almost a week later than what they originally said, because apparently your time is all about how many other apps are in the queue at the moment, which apparently is a ton. So we're just kind of sitting here, and we actually felt very stressed at first finding that out. About 2 days ago, we found out, it might not actually be ready in time. Felt real stressed at first. And then it was like, okay, you know what? God is actually really gracious with just a whole bunch of things. We've been sick. We're trying to get back home to Oklahoma. And so what first felt like a lot of stress, because we're supposed to launch on the 11th. We've been telling you guys that for a month and a half. And God just took that stress and turned it into a blessing. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today, really, and how to handle stress. What do you do when you hit these hard seasons and things like that? So that is our big announcement. It will be coming the 15th, which is kind of fun because it gives us more time this week to actually fully unveil what this whole thing is. So next week's podcast, Jason and I will be, I believe Jason will be joining me as long as we have time to set that up. And we'll be giving you a full rundown of what this app is, who it's good for, if it's going to be useful, all of those things. So that will be fun. But right now, we're gonna dive in. So I titled this episode "Moving Forward When You Feel Burnt Out," and you could title this many different ways, like surviving when you've been through sickness, or when it's a hard season, or title it kind of any way you want. But I'm feeling this right now because really for the last month, I've had to just kind of put one foot in front of the other with a whole bunch of just kind of semi-hard circumstances. So nothing over the top world shattering, right? There are those seasons where there are just absolute earth shattering things that happen. We've just had kind of a series of just kind of I'd actually really say since the first week of January, we've had scarlet fever. I was in the middle of first trimester, and again, nothing earth-shattering, but a lot of stuff where I felt like, okay, I got to put one foot in front of the other. I'm starting to feel tired, but we can muster through this, and we can get through this week, and next week should be lighter. But then, you get hit with, then the next week is not lighter. The next week's even harder. And too many days in a row and you start to think, oh, I can't, do I just keep putting one foot in front of the other? And right now, as I'm recording this, I feel really exhausted. I feel tired. I feel emotionally burnt out. And I feel like I just have to keep moving forward, one foot in front of the other. I'm not at home. I'm not in my home. I, in fact, actually have to now get all of our stuff packed up after an extended stay with family. And then we have to drive 18 hours to get home. There's a lot that needs to be done. And so there are times when I feel like you have a hard season and you can just kind of take a step back, clear the schedule, have some days at home. And I mean, that's such a blessing when that can happen. There's other times though, where you just have to put one foot in front of the other, right? You have to keep moving forward, even when you're feeling burnt out. And that's why I titled today's episode that. So what I did is I sat down because, to be honest, the last couple of days, the last kind of week, especially coming off the emotions of my grandmother's wedding, my grandmother's funeral, Jason kept accidentally calling it a wedding. And then I started calling it a wedding. It's not one of those, it's not funny, but sometimes people laugh at funerals because that's just, you are awkward. So apparently I'm awkward. My grandmother's funeral, coming off the emotion of that has also just been really tough. And there's been a lot. And so the last couple of days, I've just kind of had a bad attitude. I felt very emotionally drained. I feel very done. I feel very done with everything. I don't want to do a thing. I just don't want to. And I recognized I was really getting to that attitude where I'm like, everything's terrible. Everything's horrible. And you get into that just like, everything is the pits. And when I hit that point is when I realized, oh, I need to adjust my attitude. I need to remind myself of truth. And it's not okay to just sit in that funk. You might actually be in a hard season. You might be dealing with some really hard stuff. It might be too big and too much for you to handle. Absolutely. And yet God calls us to go to Him in those times and to cry out to Him. And that's where I felt that I've been this week is needing to go through these 4 steps that I'm about to talk about. And I won't say that I'm like perfect at this because I'm not, but it really does help. It helps me to shift my priorities, to shift my focus back to the Lord, back to what is actually what we should be focusing on. So, and Jason's always really good to remind me of this as well. And I, can tend to go to him and let all my true emotions out, right? And my overdrawn emotions and my pregnant emotions. It doesn't help that I'm pregnant right now. Your emotions, you're in like a next level of heightened emotions. And, I don't actually cry that much. And just normally, I'm just not a huge crier. Never have been my whole life. And I was the tears were flowing at my grandma's funeral, which totally makes sense. But I was crying much more than is even normal for me. And I finally hit, I'm like, what is wrong with me? And I was like, oh, I'm pregnant. And I told Jason, pregnant women should not be allowed to go to funerals. It's just there's too much. So that's another thing, currently in my season where I feel like, pregnancy just pushes you a little closer to already feeling burnt out, right? And so this last week, I just, with all of that, with being pregnant, with the over emotions, everything, I hit this wall and I really needed to remind myself of some truth. So here's what we're going to go through. This is kind of like my 4-step. I don't actually have like a 4-step program, but when I really sat down to think about it, this is what I do. All right, we're going to take a brief pause for our first sponsor for today's episode, which is OneSkin. So if you're like me, you are ready for warmer, sunnier days. My body has been craving it. We had some warmth and sun today, and I was so happy. But is your skin ready for the warmer, sunnier days? This is not something I actually normally think about, but your skin goes through a really big transition between seasons, not just on the surface, but at the cellular level, which I think is really interesting. The more you learn about how God has made our bodies, it's really incredible, which is why it's important to nurture it from the inside out with products that do more than just protect against the sun's UV rays. Now, this is something, you guys, I will say, as I'm in my mid-30s, as things don't look quite the same as when I was 22, I'm starting to realize that your skin is the only skin you have, and it's actually quite important to be treating nicely, right? I've never been the biggest person. I'm not one that's at Ulta buying 40 different skincare products all the time. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's just not me. I've never been a big, into a lot of that kind of stuff. So my problem then is I tend to neglect any skincare at all. So now I'm getting older and I'm like, oh, wait a minute. There are probably some things I need to do right now for my skin in the future. So when you start talking about like the cellular level of your skin, that's when I sit up and pay attention because I think it's really interesting. Okay, so OneSkin's products are powered by their scientifically proven peptide called OS1. Now, this peptide reduces the accumulation of damaging aging cells. So these are the cells that make your skin less resistant and more prone to lines and wrinkles. So instead of just masking the issues of trying to kind of, barely smooth them out, but they're not doing anything, OneSkin addresses them at the cellular level, boosting your skin's natural barrier to lock in moisture and help protect against the elements. So they have a full line of face and body products, including their OS1 Shield, an SPF that prevents UV-inducing aging and repairs cellular aging all at once. So here's what I really like. Like I just said, I'm not fancy. I don't need like a 12-step regimen because I won't do it. Okay, so what I love, this is how easy, is you cleanse, pat your skin dry, and then apply twice daily. I can do this, you guys. While I'm brushing my teeth, I'm putting my contacts in for the day. I can do that. Well, and guess what? Since I got my OneSkin, I actually have been doing it and I have been applying it. Like that's a win, right? When you're like as a mom and you can actually fit it into your schedule, you're like, yeah. So I love how simple they make it. And I love all of their stuff. You can go see like all the things they do. They've found out like the root cause of skin aging. All of that I just think is really, really cool. So OneSkin is the world's first skin longevity company. By focusing on the cellular aspects of aging, OneSkin keeps your skin looking and acting younger for longer. Get started today with 15% off using coupon code HOME at oneskin.co. Okay, that's 15% off at OneSkin, like ONESKIN, oneskin.co with coupon code HOME. So you can get 15% off. You can check it out, and get your really simple regimen that's going to work well. And after you purchase, they'll ask you where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them that we sent you. Help your skin stay younger and healthier for longer with OneSkin. All right, let's get back to the episode. All right, so we're just going to talk this through because I think it can be really helpful. So many of us hit these burnt out seasons all the time, whether it's big things, and a lot of times it's just a lot of little things that kind of just push us over the edge. And it's really easy then to just walk around with a cloud over your head. And that's how I feel like I've been. So the very first thing is that I remind myself that whatever this thing is, or in like my case right now, I feel like it's like 100 little things and like 2 medium things. Whatever this thing is, whatever you're feeling, whatever these emotions are, it is the Lord's timing. This is really important for me to remember. And so that's the same way, okay? So for example, with the app, I was really devastated. I was like so stressed. Like, I can't believe it's not going to be ready on the 11th. I mean, we've been like, we submitted everything so long ago. It's just one of those that, 100% is out of our hands. Like, what can you do? I felt real stressed. I'm like, we've been telling everybody the 11th. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, but do I really trust that the Lord is in control? Because this is God's timing right now. This is God's timing. And I can grumble and complain, which is just grumbling and complaining against the Lord and his timing. Or I can recognize that it's his timing and I don't need to let that extra stress pile on. It might not be ideal, might not be what we would have chosen, but it is the Lord's timing. And when I can remember that, all of a sudden it kind of just cuts the legs off my grumbling. Right? So what I have taken to saying in the last couple of years, which has just radically changed my thinking, is I will often say to myself, this is what the Lord has for me today. And, you can be in a really tough season. And I this is really helpful for me when I am very tempted to grumble and to complain and to whine, to be kind of a victim, right? Like, poor me, this is so hard. I'm going through all this stuff. To also recognize, though, that whatever this season is, whatever God has put in front of us, this is what the Lord has for me today. This is what the Lord has for us this week. This is what the Lord has for us, fill in the blank. the timing was really not, it's never a good timing when someone passes away. But this timing of my grandma passing right 2 weeks before our new app launches, I mean, we could talk about it being really poor timing. And yet we really wanted to be there with family. I really wanted to be able to be at the funeral for a whole lot of reasons I don't need to get into now. It was my mother's mom who passed away, and my mother passed away 10 years ago. So there was definitely there's a whole lot more emotion to it than even just my grandmother passing away. There's a lot. And so I really wanted to be there and all of that. And yet the timing felt terrible. And it felt like at first real stressful. And then to remind yourself, this is what the Lord has for us right now. So we can tackle it. We can put one step in front of the other, saying, God, give us strength, all in God's strength, of course, but to also recognize this is what the Lord has for us right now. So today I'm exhausted, really kind of wishing I was just in my own house. And yet this is what the Lord has for me today. And it just, like I said, it just cuts the legs off my grumbling and my complaining when I realize this is what God has for me. And so I can grumble and complain very sinfully, or I can look at it and say, this is what God has for me. How can I find the joy in whatever this is, in whatever circumstance? So that's the first thing, recognizing that this is the Lord's timing, whatever this thing is, and this is what the Lord has for us, whether it is actually going to end up being better for us, if there's actually joy in it we don't realize, or if we just need to trust the Lord in his timing that this is what he has foreordained, right? So that's my step one. Step two, this one's a little bit more practical, but I find this actually very encouraging, is I like to remind myself that despite any discomfort that we're presently going through, any hardships, things like that our life is so much easier than generations past. And okay, so this is kind of actually a twofold thing that reminds me of. So the first thing is that I can look at that with joy, and I can recognize that, maybe things are not as hard or as bad as I think, or they're not as bad as they could be. Even with, larger things like people passing away, you kind of look at past generations and you see that, you guys, I'm so bad at remembering like statistics and exact numbers. So I was reading this book though on medieval Europe, the Reformation period. And at 14 to 16, 1700s. And the mortality rates for children under 5, was staggering. I really wish I could remember the exact amount, but it was something absolutely insane. Like you could expect like 80% of your children won't live to be 17. And that was their reality. And that was very difficult. I mean, I can't imagine being a parent back then. I don't think anybody ever got used to the death. Very, very difficult. And yet we can be very thankful for our modern world in how we live. And so, and you also think of just hardships of like, oh, I'm whining and complaining because I have to cut my grocery budget. And yet look at all this food we have access to. And, I think you can kind of compare to times past and realize we actually do have things so much easier. And I whine and complain because I can't get all my housework and my cooking done. And yet I have all these labor saving devices and, all this stuff. So on one hand, I can look at that. On the other hand, I can also look at generations past. I love reading Christian biographies throughout the years. And it also comforts me and realizes that if they can get through that, I can get through this. There's nothing new under the sun. My circumstances, my unique things are obviously unique to me and what I've experienced. And yet at the same time, they're really not that unique in all of human history. People have been through far, 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 far worse than I will ever experience. And yet it drove them to the Lord. They still found joy in that. They, if those Christians can get through it, so can I. It kind of just makes you feel less alone and maybe less of a victim. And it kind of just helps me, especially reading, like I said, reading Christian biographies, biographies of missionaries. It's really amazing to see the things that people go through, and then they turn around and praise the Lord. And yet I go through minor inconveniences and I just want to whine like a little baby. Where is my faith and where is my perspective? Because most of the time it is just deciding to turn away from that anger or that whining or the wallowing and turn to the Lord. And so for me, just for some reason, it has always been very impactful, kind of just looking back on those past generations. All right, ladies, let's take a brief pause for our second sponsor today. I'm so excited to be working with Happy Mammoth. So you guys have, if you hang around here, I have talked about women's hormones all the time. I think it's absolutely so important for women to be looking at their hormones. I think we have way bigger hormone imbalances today than we ever have in all of human history. I think it's really, really, really important. So many of us do struggle with so many symptoms, and we don't even realize they're all connected to hormones. But what can you do about it? It's so hard. Well, I'm really, really happy to be working with Happy Mammoth. They sent me some of their products and I was blown away, and I already have several things that I'm ready to start using when postpartum and for when after I have baby, really working on those hormones. All right, so Happy Mammoth is absolutely fantastic for whether you're in your childbearing years like me, or this is also fantastic for women going through menopause, perimenopause, and you're just really, any time in a woman's life when you are feeling like those hormones are doing wacky things. So Happy Mammoth is the company that created Hormone Harmony. This is the thing you want to know about probably. They're dedicated to making women's lives easier, and that means using only science-backed ingredients that have been proven to work for women. They make no compromise when it comes to quality, and it shows. Really, really happy with the ingredients they use. You can tell the care and the transparency they put into all of the things they use, which is just awesome. So it's great, like I said, for women in menopause, perimenopause, or women in childbearing years who just have hormonal imbalances, which, I have to be honest, I think it's every single one of us. But it's also helpful. A lot of people going through menopause and perimenopause really struggle trying to find anything for that season as well. So, really any women, if you're listening, this can be really helpful. So what I find interesting, they say, is the biggest benefit people say from taking Happy Mammoth's products is feeling like myself again. And as a mom who's had a few children, I completely identify with that statement. I understand what they're talking about. So for a limited time, you can get 15% off your entire first order at happymammoth.com. Just use promo code HOME at checkout. So you can go to happymammoth.com. Oh, they have a whole gut, I forget what the name of it is now, a gut supplement. Oh, it's amazing. You got to check that out. And their Hormone Harmony especially. But go check out everything they have, happymammoth.com. Use promo code HOME at checkout for 15% off. All right, let's get back to the episode. So then this really naturally leads me to the third thing. And this is, I think, the absolute key. This is completely pivotal that we do. And I don't think this is optional. You may or may not find comfort looking at Christians throughout the ages. That's fine. That's just something that I find. This third one is not optional. We need to focus on what we can be thankful for. And often, kind of going through this flow, starting with number one, reminding myself it's the Lord's timing. This is what the Lord has for me today. Generations past got through this. Other people have been through this. I can get through this. And then kind of lands me on, I have so much to be thankful for. And in every season, every circumstance, there's so much that we can be thankful for. And this is a convicting story. So I'll probably get the details wrong. Sorry, guys. Pregnancy brain, there's no ability to hold anything in this brain right now. But it reminds me of Corrie ten Boom. So if you're not familiar with her, she's, really amazing to read her biography. But Corrie ten Boom lived through the Holocaust. So she was in the concentration camps, her and her sister, and their bunker or bunkhouse, whatever they were kind of living in, they got, I believe it was fleas. Really, 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 really bad. And they were one of the only bunkers that had terrible, terrible fleas. And it was so, they're itchy and it's painful. And on top of, can you imagine living in a concentration camp, everything they're dealing with, and how easy would it feel to be are you kidding me? On top of everything else, we're dealing with this intense amount of fleas. Well, so the story goes, she ended up looking back and realizing how immensely thankful they were because they were able to hold Bible studies in their bunkhouse. And because of the intense amount of fleas, the guards stayed away. They stayed away from their bunker. They didn't go in there. And they were able to do this really intense Bible study and just praising the Lord in that. And the whole reason why was because of these fleas. Now, we don't always see a direct comparison like that. We're not always going to see the joy in our suffering. We're not always going to see why this side of heaven. We're not going to always understand. Sometimes we do. Sometimes we're like, wow, God, I can't believe you walked us through that. Other times we're never going to see it this side of heaven. And yet we can still focus on what we can be thankful for. There's always things that we can be thankful for. And it's so easy to have a complaining spirit. It's really, really easy. I mean, I have to be honest. I also think social media is really bad for this. I think social media can just be a cesspool for complaining and whining and kind of one-upmanship in like how bad my life is and how much I have to be complaining about today. I think our generation, I think millennials and younger can really just focus on the pessimistic side. And, we're going to put every little complaint out there, and it's really easy. I mean, how many reels and posts and things do you come across people complaining about their kids or their husband or the dishes and all the things? And so it can be really, really easy that we just really slip into that critical, complaining spirit. Nothing's ever good enough. If you've ever kind of had that friend where every store they go to, there's something wrong. Every vacation you go on is, every little nitpicky thing. Every new house they buy, you never hear how great anything is. It's just all the negative, right? Well, I think most of us can really fall into that temptation of having that complaining spirit, and maybe we don't even recognize it. But when we're kind of, we have a cycling rotation in our head of how bad everything is from moment to moment, how hard things are, how, I'm feeling so sad for this and this and this. Like if I were to sit here right now and recount all of the things the past week that have made me feel bad, or, and I was sick this day and I had this and somebody said that, and, you start running it through. I could be miserable for another week about it. And it really is going to that's where your focus ends up being. And we replay it in our head over and over again. I read something one time. It was probably like like a meme or a post or something. And it said, bitterness has a sharp memory. And that was deeply convicting to me. So bitterness being, you're bitter at someone, you have some chip on your shoulder, whether it's warranted or not. People do bad things and people have hurt us. And, there are times where legitimately they were in the wrong. And there's other times where I just construe that they were in the wrong, right? And I'm being overly sensitive, whatever. But on either hand, when you're bitter, you are replaying those things in your head over and over and over and over. And so if you have, you keep going back to this one conversation with someone over and over, and it's all you want to talk about, and that's what you want to tell people. Bitterness has a sharp memory. And that was so convicting, because if I'm not replaying it in my head over and over and over, you forget the details. It goes away. You're not constantly thinking about it. And guess what? You don't remember exactly how the conversation went. Like you're not replaying it again and again. And I think complaining is the same way. Complaining has an extremely sharp memory because we're reviewing it in our minds, constantly going over it and over it. So that's ditch one. Ditch two, that's not the ditch, but the highway, the way to go, is to focus on what you do have to be thankful for. And so, I remember I was having a bitterness towards someone. This was years back, and I just feeling real frustrated and kind of feeling hurt. Like I was hurt, and they don't see it, and that kind of thing. And I was getting bitter. I was just getting more and more like I don't even want to see this person, and getting real frustrated. And I mean, to this day, I feel like I was in the right. Maybe not. There's always two sides to both stories. But that part doesn't matter. I started praying and asking the Lord to give me more softness towards this person, that I would have more love to this person, and that I could just, it wasn't some huge big thing that like needed reconciliation. I really just needed to like move on and get over myself, right? Get over my hurt. And I just really started praying, Lord, give me love for this person. And I just, for a long time I didn't feel anything. And then slowly, I didn't even realize it. I just started becoming a little bit more soft and a little bit more soft. And then all of a sudden I wasn't bitter anymore. And so I think the same thing can be applied to our thankfulness when we're feeling so stressed, we're feeling so overwhelmed, when we're feeling bitter or hurt, or kind of whatever the season is that you're just feeling so, or grief, or so many things, right? Can just drag us down, make us feel terrible. And yet, how much of your breath, how much of your thinking space is going towards thankfulness to the Lord? And it can be really little things. Thank you, Lord, I woke up this morning. Thank you that I have food, down to, and that's when you're in a really, really hard season. Something earth-shattering is happening. You really do need to fight to find things you can be thankful for, right? There's other seasons where I'm in right now. Nothing earth-shattering is happening. But like today, I was like, everything's terrible. I hate everything. I'm like, I just want to go crawl in a hole, right? And just sleep for like a week and ignore everything and everyone and all responsibilities. Just where I'm at. Hello, I told you there's some pregnancy hormones going on. And I realized, there are so many abundant things that I can be thankful for. And today was sunny and warm. It's been raining the last week. I could be so intensely thankful for that and get out in the sunshine for a few minutes. No matter where we're at, no matter the circumstance, there are things to be thankful for. And the really amazing thing is we can train our brains. So if right now you feel like your brain is set on critical mode, it's set on complaining mode, it's hard. Because your automatic response is to go critical. Your automatic response is to complain. Your automatic response is to see the glass half full every single time. Half empty. I'm sorry. You see it half empty every single time. That is your MO. That's what you're going to naturally go towards. Well, that can be really tough because it means taking your thoughts captive each and every moment, directing them back to the Lord, directing them towards joy, towards thankfulness. But the really amazing thing is we can retrain our brains. And so when you slowly and painfully make yourself think on the positive side to be more thankful, all of a sudden you start to go there a little quicker. All of a sudden you start to, your response starts to be thankfulness when something happens. And, if you really look at your prayer life, if you think about the times where you kind of you reach out to the Lord and pray, I would assume many of us would say that 90 to 100% of the time, we're reaching out to ask something of the Lord. I don't think that's wrong at all. We should be asking the Lord for things all the time. Lord, give me strength today. Lord, give me courage. Lord, help this medical thing come back good. Absolutely, we should be asking the Lord. But is that your only communication? Is your only communication, Lord, help me. Lord, this is hard. Lord, help me. Because I actually think it should be the other way around. Now, I'm not saying this is easy, but like 90% of our day should be praising and thanking the Lord, and that 10% asking. I don't mean that strictly, but we could be thanking God every second for the things we have. Every other breath, we could have things to be thankful for, and yet we most of the time don't. We forget to thank God for things. We forget to proactively say, thank you, Lord, for today. Thank you for this, and be going to him in thankfulness and prayer and praise. And actually, our first response when something great happens is to turn to the Lord. And a lot of times, that's not our first response. We don't even think about doing that. Well, of course, when something bad happens, our first response then is not going to be to go to the Lord in praise. And so really, this is just huge. And this is key for me, is focusing on what I can be thankful for. And even if it is, Lord, I'm thankful for you. I'm having such a hard time. I don't know what else to say, but God, thank you for you. Thank you for my very breath today. And I do think that your brain starts to get retrained. And instead of immediately jumping to something happens and immediately jumping to complaining, glass is half empty, you jump to, okay, this is what the Lord has for me today. Thank you for this. So actually, that's kind of the step I went through today with, not today, over this last 3 days with the app. Is my first initial response was stress. Lord, please, because at the point we were like, oh, it might still come in time. We might be okay. Lord, please help it come in. And then I was like, okay, we're going to have to make this decision. So when we made the decision, we're going to have to push it off. I felt real stressed for a second. And I thought, no, you know what, Lord, this is what you have for us this week. I can't change this. I can't call Apple and say, can you please put ours to the front of the queue? Pretty please. I'll give you $3. No, we can't do that. And so this is what the Lord has for me today. And so I'm going to reframe the way I'm looking at this week, and I'm going to view it as a blessing from the Lord. I'm going to view it in light of, our kids have been super sick. This is going to actually allow us to get home before the app launches, to be in our own beds. There's a lot of blessing if I looked for it, but it can be very overshadowed by that immediate stress, the immediate, this is not what I had planned or what I had wanted, type of thing. And then I can, but then it immediately went into relief mode. God has this. He's the one truly in control. I don't need to stress because I can't. Stressing's not going to do anything anyway. And then I can be thankful for, I can find the joy in this new direction that I didn't think would be the direction for the week, right? I can find new joy in that. I can be thankful for that. And it's the same way. I mean, this seems more obvious, but with my grandmother's funeral right now, been a hard couple of weeks, not nearly what we thought. These last couple of weeks, we already thought we're going to be absolutely incredibly busy and overwhelming. Let's throw in a cross-country trip just for fun. And yet I could really look at the thankfulness of it's actually better now happening than it would be in May. We have something really big in May for our family. And I'm really thankful actually that it would be this timing now instead of then. And I'm really thankful that it actually opened the door to get to see family that we haven't seen in a while. There's definitely things that I could be thankful for in the midst of stress and busyness and morning sickness and not wanting to do a cross-country trip. And I mean, I think we can do this in the little things too. In the little daily average little things we can look at, plans fall through, something gets canceled, we can look for things to be thankful for. And that this is the one that's, I think, the absolute biggest heart-changing difference is focusing on the joy and what we can be thankful for instead of always going to woe is me, right? And the complaining side. All right. So that's step number 3. And then step number 4, this is kind of just more practical, is then learning how to put one step in front of the other. And there's definitely, I'm sure people have different personalities. We react to things differently, but I'm sure for a lot of us that the hardest part often when we are feeling so overwhelmed and burnt out is figuring out how to dig out of that and put one step in front of the other. And when we feel like there's just too much to do, too many things, it's very easy then to get paralyzed and we take no action whatsoever. Like, why do we do this? I have done this so many times and it's so silly because like from the outside, someone could be like, dude, just like chill, make some coffee and like write a list. And then do the first thing. Like it really is that simple. And yet, we don't do that and we procrastinate and then it gets harder and then it gets bigger. And there's definitely hormones and emotions and all of that in the mix, right? But really it is learning though how to put one step in front of the other. And I have now learned that when I am feeling that real big overwhelm and just all of that it actually is as simple as I need to sit down and I need to do a brain dump. I need to make a list. And sometimes that list is hard. It's a hard list. It's not like a bunch of simple, easy stuff that I can just check off real fast. Take a shower. Okay, check. And sometimes, though, it is that simple. So I'm thinking, whenever we kind of have a newborn around the house, there are definitely days where I am so overwhelmed, but it is often very easy stuff. Like I need to take a shower, but I also need to figure out my vitamins. I need to refill some of my vitamins, which means I need to order them. And I need to also figure out what's for dinner. You start to get this list of stuff that's not, crazy, crazy, crazy hard stuff, but you do need to make a list, get your coffee, take a shower, check, check, check. And that really, really helps. There's other times with a bigger season where you're juggling bigger things, harder things that, you still need to make a list and then you need to really prayerfully pursue, how am I going to get this done? Do I need to ask for help? Do we need to take things off this list? But putting one step in front of the other and not getting paralyzed by that burnout. And now what I've realized is I'm older and wiser, and I've done this to myself too many times, is there is a feeling when you're in this like overwhelmed, burnt out, that you're kind of just waiting for the emotions to come, like the good emotions, right? You're just kind of waiting, like you feel like it's too hard because you don't feel well. You're feeling depressed. You're feeling that anxiety, and you're just feeling like I can't really like get going until my emotions feel better. And I've done that. I've kind of handicapped myself too many times because I'm kind of waiting for those emotions to pick up, and then it does take a while, and then maybe eventually they come and I feel a little better. So I'm going to start getting stuff done. And what I've realized now is you just really hurt yourself. It really makes it so much harder to get stuff done. Whereas now I'm like, I don't really care if I don't feel it. I'm just going to make myself do a list. And I'm going to make myself start that first thing. And I'll always start with an easy thing. Like, I'm just going to put the laundry away. I need to tackle world peace, but I'm going to put the laundry away first. And really, in that pit of overwhelm, it is a breath of fresh air to just get one little thing done. Even if actually that thing was hard, like I actually had to force myself to get the laundry done and make it happen. It is the door, it is the gateway to getting the next little thing done and the next little thing. And before you know it, you are on the path to digging out of that overwhelm, to digging out into, I'm feeling a little better. But often the action has to come before the emotions are there. And this is what I have learned. This is the wisdom I have gleaned by doing this to myself enough times that I really do just have to put one step in front of the other, do the next right thing, not even necessarily worry how it's all going to work out or what all the things or all the moving pieces. We trust the Lord. It's His timing. I'm going to do the next one thing, and I'm going to do it with thankfulness. So that is my pep talk for you today. This is what I have been telling myself. And in fact, talking it all out to you guys in this like half an hour, which normally I just kind of remind myself like a sentence here or there. So talking to myself for half an hour about this, I am like, oh yes, why do I do this? Why am I feeling so depressed today and so down? Like this is what I need to do. So I'm hoping that you feel motivated from this. I also want to encourage you. You know, you go through these steps, you're feeling better, you do a step, you get the laundry done. You might get knocked back down. You might get knocked back down and something else happens. Or the next day you're like, great, now the kids are vomiting. That's what we've been dealing with this week. By the way, our kids have been sick while we're here with family. I got very sick. Being pregnant, I actually got it the worst, which is terrible. Anyway, you should not be able to get the flu when you're pregnant. I just said something about that in January too. I don't think anything and nothing else should have to happen to you while you're pregnant, right? That should be the rule. And you know, sometimes that does happen where you kind of get like, you're like, oh, I made a step, I made progress. And then you get knocked back down. And we just have to recognize this is what the Lord has for me today. I'm going to get a cup of tea and I'm going to start this process over. So I do want to encourage you that it's not always super linear. It's not always very simple. But this is where we kind of just, you know, ask the Lord for strength, ask the Lord for courage, ask the Lord for wisdom, ask the Lord to help you be thankful. I think a lot of times we forget, we feel like we need to muster this all on our own. We feel like I need to figure out how to be more thankful. Ask the Lord to help you with that. We know that He is good and faithful to deliver those things that we ask. And so ask the Lord to help you with your bitterness, with your anxiety, with your anger. Ask Him to help you to be more thankful, to put one step in front of the other, to find that little glimmer of, I can do this, and that little glimmer of motivation, and ask the Lord for these things. All right, ladies. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you for putting up with not having video. For those of you on YouTube, we'll be back to our regular setup. Thanks for letting me be real and honest with you guys today about my emotions, my places that I'm struggling, things that I try to do to point myself back to the Lord. And thank you guys for, I feel like, I know I can't hear you or see you right now, but I always feel, especially with these types of episodes, that we're all just kind of sitting around the coffee table, drinking coffee together. So thank you for listening in. We'll give you guys updates on this darn app. No, we actually should be completely fine by the 15th. We should be totally good to go, but God is in control. So this is what the Lord has for us this week. We're going to be thankful for it. We're going to embrace it with joy, and we're going to embrace it, most importantly, with thankfulness. So I'm thankful for you ladies. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you guys back here next week for the next episode.